Welcome to WFPC Podcasting, your local source for the heart and history of Pike County, Indiana. And now, here's your host, Randy Harris.
Welcome to WFPC Podcasting. This is a weekly look at news, information, and the people in and around Pike County. Today's visit is with longtime friend Bob Price. In some circles, Bob might be better known as Mr. Magnificent. Bob, how are you this morning?
I'm doing magnificent. How about you?
You know, that magnificent, when we were at the cafe, the girls, Christy and Amanda and Angela and whomever else, everybody knew you not as Bob Price, but Mr. Magnificent.
Absolutely. Even young man works there at Amber Manor. He came to me the other day and he said, I just found out what your name is. And I said, what's that? Mr. Magnificent. He said,
I think Christy paid you a visit. He probably heard it from her.
Yeah.
But it fits you. You've always, when greeted, you've always said, I'm magnificent. Thank you. That's a positive attitude.
I like to surprise people too. You know, everybody's telling you how sad they are or how sick they are or whatever. And I said, I'm magnificent. You know, and you see the look on their face. They're saying, nobody's magnificent.
You have always had a strong faith. You've always had a strong faith in Jesus. That's helped that positive attitude, hasn't it?
That's one of the things he said. Treat everybody like they're your family and part of it type thing.
Bob, you've had an interesting life, and most of it, I think you told me earlier, you've been to 14 different countries, but you've always come right back home to Pike County. What year were you born?
I was born in 1933, June 19th, 1933.
So you are now 92 years old.
92 years old, and I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
When did you move here?
I moved here in 1955.
I thought you had been here longer than that. Pike County, the world, everything has changed in 70 years. So you started out in Pittsburgh. What did you do? What was life like in the 1930s, 40s, and early 50s in Pittsburgh?
Well, it was a different philosophy everywhere. We lived in an area, every part of the Pittsburgh area was made up of different nationalities. Little cliques of people that are all the same nationalities. You
had a melting pot.
And melting pot of people.
And neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And
so you got to learn quite a bit about the different people and the different nationalities and how they think and everything. Even down to the slaughtering of animals. You know, for the butcher shop, you had a certain way that you had to go about it because it's kosher.
Right.
You know, or it's of Greek background, or it's Italian background. And so you had to know all those things when you worked in a grocery store type thing. So,
did you work in a grocery store?
I worked in a grocery store when I was in my junior high school.
That was my first job as a grocery store clerk, carry-out boy. Yeah, maybe adjust those. Perfect.
Yeah.
Carry-out boy, clean the parking lot, things like that. Great experience. Believe it or not, I was kind of shy, and that helped bring out that personality a little bit. Had to work with people.
Yeah.
So you're a junior in high school, you're working in a grocery store in Pittsburgh. What happens next?
Well, after that, I had to go to school, of course, high school, complete high school. And I got a job with what they call the Union Railroad. It was a steel company, the transporting of iron ore into the mills out there in Pittsburgh. They're all pretty well gone now, but there was a day when the area glue at night because of the reflection of the burning for the all the items that they're preparing for to go into the iron pour. And so you had to transport even the hot iron from one part of the mill to another part of the mill through the railroad. It went on until I was 19, and at 19, Uncle Sam decided that he wanted to draft me in.
That was 1952?
Yeah.
Korea.
1952 is when I got out of the service. No, I said 52, excuse me, 50.
Okay.
In the 52, I went into the service. Yeah.
Okay.
And I was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And that's how I started out in this area.
So what was your job in the military?
And in the military, I had spent a little time with the National Guard before I was drafted because you knew you were going to get drafted. And so I got the rank of corporal, and then they sent me to mechanic school in Fort Campbell, and they lined me up with, I was to go to Korea. And on the way to Seattle to board a ship to Korea, the war ended. And so then when I got to Seattle, well, they had to rearrange where I go. And at that time, they said, you're going to North Alaska. And so I went to North Alaska, and I spent 27 months up there in North Alaska.
Were you a mechanic? Were you still in the 101st Airborne?
Did I what?
Were you a mechanic?
I ended up being a motor sergeant. And that was, you're responsible for all the vehicles and all the mechanics that are in there and all. And at that time, we were still under the possibility of having to fight the Russians.
Cold War.
And that has never changed in all these years. But we had to practice for the fight of the Russians. And every month, each company had to provide troops in the field, out in the woods in Alaska. They had a club there they called 50 Below Club, in which you had to be for 3 days or better at 50 below zero and the snow and everything. And I became a member because I made it to 58 below zero for 3 days, sleeping in the snow and making it.
So you would take that snow to insulate your body to keep some heat.
The snow sometimes was clear up to your waist, and you in your parka that you had on, it had a wire, a copper wire inside, so that you could squeeze the hood down to where only your eyes could see out. And even if you were breathing hard, you left little puffs of white pall behind you. Looked like a baseball all the time. It was from your breath that was leaving behind you your trail. And you sometimes could be seen for quite a ways by the trail you were leaving. So. But you lived and slept in the snow. You did your best to try to keep your food warm that you had in your pockets, because if you didn't, then they would be frozen. And when you tried to heat them on a little gasoline heater that you had, you would have the whole outside would be burnt, and the center of the can would be frozen. And so you just got pieces of those cans. They call them sea rations in those days.
You just chipped away at it.
Yeah. And it was tough. You could not sleep in your clothes at night. You had to strip down to your underwear, and they gave you a rubber mat that you could lay on, but you had to blow it up first. Now, when you blow hot breath into a balloon or into a pad, it went flat on you anyway. It didn't make any difference. You knew it was going to be flat in just a short time. So you wanted to maintain the clothes so that the first thing in the morning you put your clothes back on and your boots right away, because otherwise you would start to freeze to death. And so you had to get, and at times when it was 58 below zero, I had to hold both hands, hold my boot, and try to get my foot in it. And I was shaking so bad that the boot and everything went flying across the tent that we were sleeping in. And so it was extremely cold at that temperature, but you soon get used to the really cold atmosphere that you're in. So,
where did they send you from Alaska?
Fairbanks. We were just outside of Fairbanks, within the Arctic Circle. We were, in those days, you had no roads past Fairbanks, because if you did, the bulldozers had to come in and make the road. And when we transported tanks and trucks and every other kind of vehicle, we went to have a bulldozer go down a glacier. And you knew one thing: don't touch the brake, because if you touched that brake going down that ice pack, you went over the edge. So you had to just hang on to the steering wheel and do your praying.
Where did you go after Alaska?
After Alaska, I came back to Pennsylvania, and we got married. My wife is from here in Campbelltown. She worked as a nurse at Owensboro, Kentucky.
How did you two meet?
We met by she was walking down the street, and in those days, there were so many women working in Owensboro, Kentucky. It was not hard to get a date with anyone. But that's how we did. We met on the street and talked and got to know each other. And then I was sent to Alaska. After that, I came back, and she and I got married here in Petersburg. And then we traveled to Pittsburgh, and I went to school and got a degree in engineering. And unfortunately, her father committed suicide. and left her mother, and we came back here then after graduation. Whirlpool had promised me a job, and when I went to Whirlpool then decided they were cutting back, and so therefore they didn't have any place for me. So I just went hunting for jobs. Got jobs with a company by DeBow & Reynolds, which had a brush manufacturing plant in Princeton. I worked 6 years with the brush manufacturing, and it's now burned down, but that was, back in those days, we used bristle brush, actually. What you see now, you get plastic.
Right.
But back in those days, they had the Japanese men and women go through the forest over there and pick. The wild boar would scrape its back against the trees, and they would gather up those little strips of bristle and pack them together, and then they would ship them to Princeton, Indiana, where they were able to assemble them into various paintbrushes of any type. And DeBow & Reynolds in those days was located in Louisville, headquarters, but we had the last making of brushes with bristle. Everything started going to plastic after that. So,
What year are we up to? Is this about 1960?
But my whole life.
What year were you making bristles in Princeton?
In Princeton, I was there. I went in there in 1955 and come out with 6 years.
So 61. And where did you go from there?
From there, I went to Evansville, and I worked for a couple of the different plastic manufacturers down there. Kenny Kent, or the Kent, the Shawnee Plastics, are two plastic companies down there that manufactured auto parts. Worked for them for about 4 years, and International Steel down there. Worked for International Steel. And then the Navy made me an offer to come to Crane, Indiana. And I took advantage of that because it was a good deal. And went with them and was in management and did management studies for them. And at those days, you did time studies of everything, you know. And that was what I had to do starting out. And then I had to learn safety of explosives. And once you got that, you knew what you had to watch for when you were in the manufacturing there. They were manufacturing lots of explosives of different types, you know. And so there, I was put into management and ended up being in management for about 6 years and on parts explosives for nuclear submarines. And so that took it up, and then everything slowed down on nuclear subs, on anything, missiles, anything, slowed all down. And they came and said, the Marine Corps would like to have you. If you would go with them, you stay here at Crane, but you still work for Headquarters Marine Corps in Washington, D.C. And you'll be in the domestic and international terrorism, and you'll be assigned from them as to what you'll do, and you'll have to be flying back and forth to Washington, D.C.
Now, this brings us up to the 1980s. Late 70s?
Yeah, about 87, yeah.
Because that when you and I became acquainted, that's what you were doing at that time.
Yeah.
That's an interesting job.
Yeah, yeah. And we had to held lots of conferences between all military and for teach them what the latest devices, like a simple lock that you go to the hardware store and buy, you can't use on buildings storing explosives or weapons. And so it had to be special. Everything had to be special. And it was a learning process too for me, because you could take a hardened steel, a lock, and when you got to about 50 below zero, if you hit it with a hammer, it would shatter like glass.
Right.
And it just pieces fly everywhere. Chains that you wanted to haul a vehicle in, you had to use the nylon rope because the steel would just break in two easily.
Wow.
So it was a new learning process. What can you do and what can you get by with type deal.
Boy, your experience decades before in Alaska gave you a little bit of knowledge there.
Yeah.
It?
Yeah, it was a lot different atmosphere where you're at, and the extreme cold. Everything, you had what was called a willow wall. A willow wall was when the warm air from the Japanese Sea would build up along Anchorage. Anchorage then would allow the wind to build up and come over the mountains into the Arctic Circle. And when they come in, you could see it coming off of the mountains, a big, huge snowball, coming at you. And you had to make sure you had your rope from the barracks to the motor pool so you could grab a hold of that rope and find your way back into the building. Otherwise, you couldn't see where you were at anywhere. The snow was just so great. And the temperature would go from like 30 below zero to 30 above zero in just a matter of a few seconds.
Wow. Because
that warm air coming across. And then when it stopped, then it went the other way. Your temperature went right back to 30 below. It was not uncommon to be at 30 below. You weren't allowed to wear any clothing other than his military clothing till it got warm enough to be zero. And when you got zero, you're allowed to wear your civvies if you wanted to. But otherwise, you wore the military thing. So it was, like I say, it was a learning process all the way around. They had a lake. They told us there was a lake there. We arrived there in November, and so it was frozen. But when everybody talked about the lake, you wondered, where was the lake? You couldn't find any lake. Well, they get their Jeep out, and they'd run ropes from the back of the Jeep back and tied big knots in the rope. And so you were learning to stand on skis, and you grab that rope and hang onto that knot area with that Jeep flying around the lake on the ice, and you would hang on as long as you could, and then you lost control and you went flying across the ice, and then had to get up and come back and wait for that Jeep to come by again, grab a hold of it and learn to be able to stand on the skis type thing. And a lot of it was getting around through the snow.
How long did you continue in that job? Is that what you retired with?
What was that?
Is that the job that you retired with?
No, the job I retired with was the Marine Corps.
Right.
The Marine Corps, and I was sent all over the world.
You told me earlier you went to 14 different countries.
Yeah, 14 different countries in the world. What? And what it was is, number one, we were to check every building that stored explosives or guns or weapons or anything in to see if it was really hard enough to keep any terrorists from getting in it easy. And then you would then go and try to figure out how to lock it. What do you have to lock it in an extreme cold or any other type of temperature? And I had to travel. My first trip that I was sent out on was to Cuba, as they pronounce it down there. And I was in Cuba, and at that time it was strictly Marine Corps. And since then, with all the when they gathered up the terrorists in Iraq and Iran and different places, that they would bring them there and store them there to live, so that American lawyers couldn't get to them because they're in a foreign country. So it's a different atmosphere again. You know, you got guard prisoners. They make sure they're safe in that place. And that they have, there was a problem from the government there in Cuba at that time. They were after the people who were in control of Cuba before. They, Budapest, the family is still over there as far as I know. They raise pigs and chickens on the Marine Corps base, and they're there only because the Marine Corps is there. If Cuba gets to take the place back, then they may not make it very far.
So this brings us into the 1990s. When did you retire?
I retired in 96, October 96.
So how, from what you observe through the news and your other resources, your sources, how is terrorism changing from when you dealt with it in the 80s and 90s to what we're seeing today?
Not really changed any. There are so many different religions that are involved in terrorism. Many of them follow a certain religion that they follow, and they believe very strongly in theirs, the same as we do in this country as a Catholic or a Protestant or whatever. They have their religious beliefs too, and it's very strong. And it's climate. They have weapons, and they're very hard to deal with. And Americans are sacrificed whatever needs to be sacrificed for them. So it's a different world and different climates and different things.
Different mentality, different approach.
All the difference, yeah. And you had to worry about them, even back in the early parts, you had to worry about them taking over airplanes or taking over a ship. And
which occasionally happens.
Yeah, it happened a number of times. And Stalin in those days had a book out in Russia that said to kill one person is a crime. That's a shame. To kill 100 is just a statistic. You can't assume the mind will accept the fact you just killed 100 people. And that seemed to be a lot of the philosophy that they follow too over there. Is when they took airplanes, they would always look for your passport. And then if they found a passport for an American, sometimes they ended up getting shot and thrown off the plane at the runways. And so you had to be extremely careful in what you get into. And I could go on, but there's a lot of things that we knew about and we knew to be careful with, we watch. And if you got in that country, you wanted to know where were the hot spots, where did you really go, and what do you really need to have. And we would test the Marines on guard duty just to see if they knew their job or not. And we always had a Marine officer standing by to get us out of trouble. When they tell you to hit the ground, you hit the ground because they're young guys and they got an automatic weapon. They're scared and you're scared, and you do what they tell you until you can get somebody in there to get you free. It's just part of checking checking the security. Did they have the correct number of radios? Many of them only had one frequency to work on. And anytime that a terrorist would want to be trying to get in, they would learn the frequency, grab one of the Marines on guard duty, and take his radio and tape it open so that it stopped all the base from knowing what was going on.
Now, during all this time, you still have family back in Pike County.
Uh-huh.
Did you get to come home much? Were you gone for extended periods of time, or did you punch in at 8 o'clock in the morning, punch out at 5, and come home? You were gone for quite a while, weren't you?
Well, you always wanted to try to make sure that you tried to cover your tracks, even when you were home. If I seen somebody taking pictures of my house, I went out to find out who they were and where they were from and everything, because I couldn't guarantee that they weren't there just checking my place out to go. There was a number of different people in the world that would easily turn against you as far as American citizens. You always had somebody someplace that would do something for money. And so they became their own terrorists. And today we still don't have a clear shot of everything. And I'm very glad that I have retired and live here in Pike County, Indiana. And it's a much safer area than other parts of even the United States.
Bob, we're going to come back to Pike County in just a minute. We're going to pause and pay some bills. Recently, the real estate market has been unpredictable, but at Harris Real Estate, we still have clients looking for homes and properties. Let us sell your home and or find you your next one. We are local, we know the business, and we know the community. Harris Real Estate has listed and sold hundreds of properties right here. Harris Real Estate, 812-380-1065. Also, when you wash your car on a regular basis, there are many advantages. You're easier to see, you preserve the life of your vehicle, you help maintain its value, protect its paint, prevent corrosion, and it just looks better. It only takes 6 quarters or your credit card to get it started. Stop by Petersburg Car Wash today. Petersburg Car Wash, home of the springtime yellow Mustang, 401 South 9th Street, Petersburg. Keep it clean. Bob, you're 92 years old. I still see you down at the car wash, washing your car. And you mentioned before we took that little break, Pike County. It's been home to you since the 1950s. You've raised your family here, and I know last year we sold your home and you moved into assisted living at Amber Manor. If we're blessed, we get to that point where we just need a little assistance. How is that going?
Well, that's going fine. They've treated me very well, and it's somewhat about the military that you have your private room, you have your bath and everything, your bed, and you have to do certain things that you did in military. Like, for instance, I make my bed, and I make my own bed every day. I don't have to wait for somebody else to make it for me, type of. But generally, they'll help me make the bed. They've done everything they can to make it pleasant and safe to stay in.
Great. You mentioned earlier you with your job, you traveled to 14 different countries. You always came home to Pike County. How is Pike County different from the rest of the world?
Well, it has different philosophies. I don't care where you go. There's always different philosophies that people have. Pike County is a very soft, easy area as far as we were concerned. Chances of a terrorist coming here to pay me back type thing, I don't believe it would ever happen. Right. But there was a day we didn't know that for sure, and we had to be careful about who we talked to and who we seen and where we were at. And that has long since passed. Now, things are differently. And at Amber Manor, they keep it very well run.
Great.
Yeah. And I enjoy being there.
Good. People here in Pike County, you mentioned we're just a little bit different. We're laid back. We're pretty easygoing, and it's a good place to call home.
Yeah. Very much is so. I retired and was sitting around, and my wife kept telling me, find something to do, right. Get out there and do something. And so it made me get up and do it. And about that time, the sheriff pulled in my driveway, and he said, I sure could like to have you work for me. And I said, well, I don't want to be out nights. I don't want to fight drunks at night, or I don't want to mess with fighting all the time type thing. I want to stay clear of that. He said, you set your pace, we'll take care of you. And so
which
I worked
sheriff,
for 6 years for the sheriff.
Which sheriff was this?
Well, I had 2 sheriffs at the time, 6 years. Yeah.
Was that Brewster and Scales, or who were the sheriffs at the time?
At the start of it, gosh, can't even think of his name offhand. It's from Otwell.
Clements?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Metters?
Yeah.
Okay.
They came along that way. Then my wife got very ill and decided it was time to take care of her because she was a nurse. She did not want to be in the nursing home. And so I took care of her at home. And hospice helped me a great deal. They were very good about helping take care of it. And I was able to get out, go have a cup of coffee with some of the guys. And just like you said, lay back area, it was safe. And
you told me one time, I'm assuming this is when you moved here, so many trees were gone because of coal mining. And over the years, you told me that the landscape has changed. Our trees have grown back.
Oh, my, yeah. They have pictures at Crane that the commanding officer used to give speeches at different places, and he would show the pictures that he had. And would show that there was no trees in southwestern Indiana. They were all stripped out. Their complete fields were nothing but dirt, you could see. And what it was in those days, the coal mines used a lot of the wood, building of homes, construction,
furniture factories.
Furniture factories, the Ferdinand and Jasper area, they all needed wood. And in those days, if you were fortunate enough to work for the coal mines, you had to go to the coal mine company store that they had and buy your house. And then Sears and Roebuck would make your house prefab and load it on a rail car. And they would come into, for instance, Winslow had a side track, and those houses were put onto the side track, and a contractor was hired to put your house together for you.
You know, I've sold a few Sears and Roebuck houses.
Yeah, Sears and Roebuck houses still called by people in construction, and they still call them Sears and Roebuck houses, even though that's what they originally were. But,
right.
And
more of a modular home.
And the trees, the children, young men especially, were paid in the summertime to plant trees all over the place. But there was no trees to be had. And so...
they were depleted.
Yeah. And you look at it now, you drive down 57, you wonder, where in the world did all these trees come from? And all, Second Life. And you just can't imagine it because there's so many trees out there. And it really amazes you that they're really Second Life. But look at the size of the tree. Look at the size of the diameter of the tree. And you can tell they're not here for 50 years. You just look at that and say, you know, that's part of nature.
Right.
Everything changes. And we're still facing all the changes that we come up with. And many things that they had to do with that. In those days, the Sears and Roebuck house had no bathroom, had no way to wash clothes other than you had to catch your water in the rain, or you had to have somebody haul your water in. Unless you were fortunate enough to have a well, very few had wells. And so it was a much rougher life that they had to go through and things that they lived through than you and I have to do today. But I often sit and think about that. the last deer that was ever recorded killed in southern Indiana was in Bedford, Indiana. That was the last deer. There was no animals available, deers or anything for hunting.
That is hard to believe. We have so many deer today.
Yeah.
And then they just came back in and repopulated.
Yeah.
What year are we talking about? When was that last deer?
What did I want?
When give me a time period. When do you think that last deer was before they started repopulating?
Well, time frame, you're talking of the 30s.
All right.
Before the start of the war and the end of the war type thing, you still had the houses and everything that you went to. And things were changed. People didn't have a bathtub to take a bath normally. You made your shower in your basement, and you were fortunate to have that, especially in wintertime. But the houses themselves were not equipped for insulation or any types of filling in. Electricity, you only have 1 or 2 plugs in a room because all you have is one radio.
Right. Today we've got them every 6 feet.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's changed just as everything else seems to have changed. Mm-hmm. But in those days, you were lucky to get a job in the coal mines, something. So.
Very good. Well, Bob, is there anything we're forgetting to touch on today? Anything else we need to talk about?
Well, there's probably a lot of things that need to talk. But I think that going along with the fact of the trees and everything, there's so much information in our library. We got a beautiful library. We got 2 libraries, have all kind of books on how they lived in those days, how they made it through, how the references that were keep towards the black and the white separation. Right. All those things are available to the people if they want to really look into them.
You know, another resource is our historical center. The historical center in what used to be the old Barrett Memorial Library.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bob, we so appreciate you coming in today. We appreciate your friendship. We've known each other for decades, and I'm so glad you came in today.
Yeah. Well, I enjoy coming in and talking to you because sometimes people tend to shy away from me, and probably good reason. But I'm really a nice guy.
We know you're magnificent.
Magnificent, right?
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for joining us for this program of WFPC Podcasting. The program is brought to you by Harris Real Estate and Petersburg Car Wash. Please like the podcast and share with your friends so more people can hear about WFPC. You may find WFPC Podcasting on our website, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to your favorite media. Join us next Friday for another WFPC Podcasting, exploring the people, information, and news right here in Pike County. See you next week.
Welcome to WFPC Podcasting, your local source for the heart and history of Pike County, Indiana. From back roads to town centers, we bring you the voices, stories, and news that shape our community. Join us on this journey through the past, present, and future of Pike County, Indiana. Tune in next week for the next episode of WFPC Podcasting.